really niche, quite a niche thing from 20 years ago. Why are you watching that? But it still prevails as this useful tool for the industry. So why not?
Yeah, because I was saying to Mike, I think it was Mike or it was, I don't know. I have these conversations so much, Will, that I don't know who the fuck I've spoken to and who I haven't. Um, but like with that era,
Mm,
it felt very personable because like like you'd watch the episode straight after you'd go on BBC Three and watch the Confidential, and like you got to know the actors, like the
yeah.
writers, the directors, like you felt like you were sort of part of it. Like even though you weren't there, like because when I first went to the Doctor Who experience just before it closed,
Mm,
like I got to Cardiff and I was like, I feel like I've lived here for like 10 years, you know what I mean? Because like
yeah.
everything that had happened and all the behind the scenes stuff, all the proms and things like that, you'd be like, I feel like I know everyone and everything about this place, you know what I mean?
I mean, it
Whereas
felt
now
so
it's just
personal.
like,
Yeah, it felt
so
so personal that I thought like Matt Smith was just going to come round the corner when I went to the Doctor Who experience. Like that's how it
yeah,
felt because there were pictures saying, "Oh, Matt Smith appears randomly on random days of the experience." It had that kind of fandom actor link that no longer exists.
yeah, because it was, I think, because it was just over from like Rock Loaf and all that stuff, and then or you just like walk down the street and be like, oh my god, they shot Boomtown here, like just in
Yeah.
your head, like you automatically like associate with stuff. And I'd say like I'm glad Unleash exists because there is an aspect of that that was definitely like how much better I think the fucking nearly said his name wrong, the Peter Capaldi and Jodie Whittaker era would have been received if there was an actual like dedicated behind the scenes show.
I think there
Like
was like Doctor Who extra for the Capaldi era, but that was more of just like pretty much what it became, at least what the Doctor Who podcast like evolved to become. But I just think like
yeah,
with the new stuff with Shuey, I feel like with the interviews with the cast especially, gone are the playfulness aspect of it, which David and Matt has. Now it seems very, very PR orchestrated. Producers at the back,
yeah,
making sure they say exactly what they need to say in order to promote it, as opposed to I remember distinctly. I think they were on the set of Amy's Choice, and it was the confidential guy, and it was Matt Smith playing with like a hand puppet. You would never get Shuigawa or the actress who plays Belinda doing that kind of stuff. Right now, you just have sat down interviews, and like this may as well be a Radio Times, sit down interview, not confidential.
yeah. I mean, yeah, because that was the one where like Matt Smith's like, I want a badger.
Exactly, and then he gets the badger hand puppet or something like that, or the toy.
But then again, it's such a shame that then it's taken until Confidential to come back on iPlayer to have all the episodes in full again.
Yeah, I mean, you had
'Cause-
really shit bootleg versions on YouTube, but that was about it, which was a shame. I can't believe, like, the archive nature of Doctor Who fans that nobody recorded it in HD and chucked it up. I assume it was a copyright issue, so they had to do flipped, like flipped horizontally or like really shit quality cut down versions and upload them to YouTube because that's how they existed. But if there was no copyright enforcement there, how come no one uploaded that? That's ridiculous.
Yeah, and I think Matt Smith's era suffered the most, didn't it? Because so you'd have the full episode would go out on like the Saturday. You'd have the
Yeah.
cut down version, I think, on the Sunday or like the Monday, and that
Mm.
was like down to 15 minutes. Like the first two series of Confidential were half an hour anyway, until it
Yeah.
went to for series three, they went up to 45 minutes. But then like on the box sets they're cut down, but the cut downs on the series 5 and 6 box set are down to like 7 to 8 minutes from
Oh,
an original 45-minute broadcast.
yeah.
And you just don't get as much from it. Because like one of my favorites is Hungry Earth Cold Blood. Because like
Mm.
when they're doing all the Foley stuff, and like I vividly remember watching that like on BBC Three in
That
2010.
sounds cool.
And then like
Yeah.
just on the box set, you don't get that in it because it's like you get a bit. Obviously, you get bits and pieces of it, but you're like, this is cut within an inch of its life.
I mean,
I
that's what, like you said, that's what it is for Series 6. Because I suddenly remember the Impossible Astronaut cut down version. And what that is like Matt Smith, Karen Gillan say a few things for like 10 seconds each. And then it just cuts to like a montage with very pop music in the background. And that's what it is. and it's no actual like deep dive into the production aspects of it. And you know what, to their benefit now, they do with like the new show, whatever it's called, they do show some of like the prosthetic work, the art department work, the CGI work. Whereas by Series 6 came along, that was completely gone. Probably because of the cut downs.
Yeah, when like I think the only one you can own in full is A Christmas Carol on the Series 5 box set, because that's the full hour long version. And
Right.
obviously
I
like the
can't
special,
remember
like
that
the
now.
David Tennant specials.
Yeah.
But other than that, it's like it's just such a pain in the ass. Like I'd pay like 45, 50 quid for his series 1 to 6 of Confidential, including A New Dimension, and like just fucking enjoy it. And I just
No,
wish that Smith had that for his last year and go. I know we had like Behind the Lens for Day of the Doctor and Time of the Doctor, but if we'd have like had Confidential throughout like that whole Series 7 run, especially like part two, like in the anniversary year,
yeah.
and like going into Capaldi, like maybe, I'm not saying that, people didn't like Capaldi because they didn't know him, but like especially like kids that were used to a young Doctor, to then see him be like cool and as like quirky as Capaldi is in real life, just on set, more would
I
have,
mean,
I think, really
because
helped.
I agree. Before Capaldi, everything was on BBC Three, and then I feel like when Capaldi came in as the Doctor, he was very unfortunate because that's around the same time where BBC Three was kind of being pushed out and eventually completely gone. So everything was pushed onto online, and not everyone has access to the internet. A lot of the country are watching TV on Freeview and don't have access like that, and would have knowledge that if you want this extra media, you'd have to go online. Because we were talking about it on a recent recording with Michael, and Michael and I were talking about Asylum of the Daleks and how people criticized it because of like the divorce plot. And then we spoke about how it was perhaps perpetuated by the fact that if you want more context of the breakup, you had to watch the like the prequel of it, which is only available on YouTube, and that was a bit
Yeah,
of a misfire, especially when not the entire world can see um, that prequel because it's only available in certain countries, like BBC content on YouTube. Sometimes, like I think it shows out even in Ireland. Irish people can't even access Doctor Who YouTube videos. Funny enough, so to rely so much on people going on the internet, you can't expect them to forge that same connection, and that's why we have like Series 9 after, and probably the same with Series 12 when you have that initial hype of a new Doctor with Capaldi in Series 8 and Jodie Whittaker in Series 11, you get that bump in viewership. And then it goes if you don't have that connection, if you don't have that bond with the show you once did, which was so easy to have back in the day because there was so much media, there was so much merchandise in stores, easily accessible. That's completely gone. And I feel like the Doctor Who experience was the biggest part of that. That leaving, like, completely destroyed the morale of a lot of fans, I think. And it was a sign of the times that the show was, like, on the decline in terms of interest, I think.
yeah, just it's like it ran out of steam and sort of like love, I think, wasn't it?
And again, that, like, in terms of perception, that fell on Capaldi's shoulders. It was like
Yeah,
Capaldi
yeah,
was the
like
Doctor during that
wrongly, it
time.
was just, oh, it's him. Like he's the Doctor, so it's his fault at the time. Even though it
Exactly.
was, I think, largely down to the BBC how they scheduled it, how much
Yeah,
time they gave it, how much like people forget that that's when we started losing episodes. Was like we lost the
exactly.
budget for a 13th episode, so then
No, I
not as
realized that
drastic as going
not
down to 8,
yeah.
but
I think if we would have stayed with 13, if Moffat didn't have the additional stress of Sherlock on his plate. However, the fact is of the matter is he only has one gap here. That was in 2016. He still maintained 12 episodes every year, besides that 1 year, and on consecutive years as well. He did split series up into two a lot of the time, but at least we would have a series every year. Whereas we see with like Kimball, he struggled to do that. He had like 2 year gaps between his series. That's why Jodie Whittaker is like the longest serving Modern Who Doctor, even though she's got the least amount of episodes in comparison to 10, 11, and 12, just because of, and that's with reduced episodes as well. Like he just couldn't hack it. So for Moffat, for all his failings, his era went out on a whimper because of the BBC, and a lot of people forget about the scheduling. Like it was so inconsistent. You would have one episode scheduled for like 8 p.m. And then the next week it would be 7:10. The week after that it would be 6:40. Some days it would be even 5:30, 5:45. It was absolutely ridiculous. And you can see the budget was kind of going, and the advertising was shambolic in Series 9 especially. I That's why the Series 9 viewership went off a cliff. Nobody cared. And it was just embarrassing. By the time Series 9 came around, the BBC's care for the show was embarrassing.
It was, and then obviously like rebooted it once after. I think like Series 10 is quite a good sort of clean break, and
Yeah.
then it's like let's have another clean break again next year. But then as soon as Jodie got any momentum, if like that's the time that you should be like pushing like to do your bloody doctor. Like, oh, this is the doctor. She's going to be back soon. Then it's like, oh, we're not going to have another series until 2020. Bye.
Yeah. And then
Jodie Whittaker, don't make me laugh.
it's oh hi Connor. It's just like the whiplash as well with that series. It's like when the show did come back, you went from a series with like no returning villains to a series with which was a clean slate in itself, to a series with like lore that you had to watch the entire show to kind of understand, with the Jadoon, with the Thomas Child stuff, with Captain Jack. It's complete tonal whiplash, and at least with Series 5, it made it clear what it wanted to do. So after the first two episodes with new villains, you have episode 3 and episode 4 and 5, which have the Daleks. And I think very cleverly, after that Dalek episode, which was quite mid, you had a returning favourite, which are the Weeping Angels. So you had the excitement there. Whereas Series 11 and Series 12 never quite struck that balance of new and old villains.
And then Russell's obviously going down the route of it's easy for me not to do returning stuff because in terms of episodes, it's only quite recent that you had, the Daleks, the Cybermen, and the Master. So, like
Yeah.
for him, he's not that bothered about returning stuff. Like the only returning character has been, well, the Toymaker and Sutek. That's all we've had.
The only good thing I can say about that is like it kind of dispels the rumor that the Daleks had to appear in every series, because if they don't, well, they didn't appear last year, 2024, or I don't believe like in any media, because you had in 2023 the Children in Need special, which kind of gave people the idea that okay, they still have to be used on a yearly basis in some sort of thing, but maybe not the main show on TV. But 2024 kind of dispelled that rumor. Or if there was a contract there and they didn't get an exception for that year, that contract may have become null and void from that point onwards. So it's not legally bound to bring back the Daleks. But if Chewie does leave this series and the one villain he were to face was the Daleks, that's a massive shame, because that interview that he did saying he wanted to see the Daleks came before like all the reshoots, before all the speculation on whether Series 3 was even going to be a thing or not. So I feel like that's the one big tragedy of this entire thing, is that Chewie didn't get his wish to face Daleks, and he would be like the only Dalek not to, I think.
We don't know if, maybe the tide will turn and we'll get that last hurrah. But
True.
I mean, I hope to see Shooty against the Daleks. I always hope for that. I hope the Doctor always faces the Daleks, because you never feel like the Doctor unless you've gone against the Daleks. And speaking of our very own Davros, Davros has entered the chat. Thank you for joining us, Connor.
Hi, Connor.
It's Mr. Ring a Ding Ding to you.
We got two of you.
Connor, we literally had the same exact picture. I had to change it on the fly.
Oh yeah, I did know, because you came in with the same picture as him.
Yeah.
Well, that's not confusing at all.
That wasn't scripted at all.
It wasn't. Yeah. We didn't even talk to each other or anything. But
no.
So you've in terms of, because I've like we've spoken about this like before, me and Connor. So I've like, in terms of you're on later in the series, so I can ask you this like on this time and not bother again. In terms of season 3 and where that lies, how do you feel about it? What are you thinking? Are you nervous about a potential another hiatus? Do you welcome it? Like, what's your thing at the moment?
I think the show will prevail. I think even if it takes a 2 year break, it will come back for season 3. Whether that is with Shu Igawa is the big question, in my opinion. I think uh, I do kind of fear because the BBC, based on what Russell T Davies has said recently, the BBC were the ones that like went to Disney in the first place. Like with or without Russell T Davies, they were going to Disney to help fund the show, which does concern me in the sense that if Disney do drop out, will the BBC even be able to afford the show as it was? Because you've got things such as inflation. It's not going to be the same budget that it once needed, like 5 years ago, even for Flux. Like it's going to be way more, especially in a post-COVID scenario and climate. So it's worrying in that respect. But I do think, as a lot of people say, that like blindly have faith in the show. In my opinion, it does rely a lot on the merchandising and the sellability of the show. And as long as it's got that marketable factor in merchandise, which it does, I think, at least, I think it will survive. But will Russell be able to execute his bolder ideas on that budget? Absolutely not. And he'll have to dial it back in. So I definitely see us having a 2 year gap. After this, I don't think the show is going to come back until 2028 at the earliest. And I think it will be with a new doctor, undoubtedly. But I think it will be back. Whether it will be good or not is another a whole different matter.
But like, if the writing, as long as the writing's good, you can suspend your disbelief. Because like Mike said before, I think he said last week that like, if you have to suspend your disbelief, like people have been doing that since we've watched Who in the 60s, like Star Trek, things like that. Like you can sort of just be like, well, I can make exceptions for some things. It doesn't have to be glossy CGI and like pretty all the time.
I agree, but I do think that's us like retrospectively watching things and realizing it was a product of its time. So what they've done recently is tried to make Doctor Who now with the Disney era a product of its time in terms of high budget. So if we were to go back to like the low budget of like not even the 2005s, because even that budget now seems to be out of touch when it comes to the climate and what the BBC can afford. If you were to go back to, you know, 82 in terms of budget and we go back to really rickety sets, will that be like marketable? Will that still put in the merchandise? Or will the fans simply give up on it because we've went back 50 years to a budget from 50 years ago to actually just allow the show to run? Then it begs the question, would the show just be better off not staying? And some people say, I mean, extended media will flourish without the show. It happened before, so the fact that it has happened before, we know it will prevail in terms of fan creations. And perhaps if we know we have hindsight now of what a break in a show would entail. So it gives us way more time to prepare, like these fan projects, these novelizations. Fanfic writers will have a field day. Big Finish will have a field day. Is it better off the show being gone for that to flourish and people can continue the show however they seem fit? Like with that film series that Dominic G. Martin is in as the Purple Doctor, that
Yeah.
kind of thing, fan films, that could prevail, and that's endless possibilities right there. I'm of the opinion that it shouldn't end, and that shouldn't be the case. No disrespect to DW 2012, which Dom is in. No disrespect to that, but I like episodes like Lux that we'll speak about eventually. Like prove to me that there's still light at the end of the tunnel. See what I did there? There's still light at the end of the tunnel with this old girl of a show. And there's nothing beats that excitement of a new Doctor Who episode. Nothing. No fan series can recreate sitting down and watching a new Doctor Who episode. And I feel like be careful what you wish for to those people that are like, let's just have a flourishing fan creative space. Eventually, that will disperse. Eventually, 30 years' time, that will be all but gone, and Doctor Who will be remembered as a relic and perhaps wasted potential. And that's my take on it.
Wow, very kind of deep and profound. It was like a sermon, that was.
I thought you were expecting that. I apologize.
That's all right, mate. So obviously we had you on for the finale last series. What have been your sort of opinions of Joy to the World and last week's episode?
Yes, I mean, yesterday I watched your review of Joy to the World, and I couldn't believe the 3.75 rating that it got because of Toby, just like his mentality of live a little 5 out of 5. I was like, Toby, come on, man, it is not a 5 out of 5. But Joy to the World, I thought, was fairly decent. It was nothing amazing. I thought Moffat could have done better. But as Michael said in that review, like, we know that Russell just went to Moffat and was like, hey, I am falling behind on scripts for the next series. Can you just do this Christmas special for me? And Moffat was just like, oh, sure. And then he just compiled his greatest hits, ideas that he already done, so was familiar with, just chucked it all into one sort of episode and hoped that nostalgia would, pull the episode through. And it does to an extent. You've got like nice callbacks to Amy with that kind of stuff, and also, Data Clouds with one of his best known episodes in, Silence in the Library. But it just doesn't hold enough. And as you guys said in that episode recording, the best part of that episode was a 15-minute segment with a companion that should have been the companion of the episode. And I think whoever that actress is who's in Bridgerton, I think she was. Is it Bridgerton, that actress? Nicola.
Oh, Nicola Coughlan, yeah.
Yeah, I feel like she was completely miscast, and I found her completely unbearable. Whereas this other character that was in it for 10 minutes was completely, lovable. And I agree with you that she was underwritten. So Joy to the World's completely run of the mill stuff, very mid for me. I gave it like a 3 out of 5, I think, like a 6 out of 10. And then the Robot Revolution, I thought was way more solid than Space Babies was. Space Babies was a really bad episode, whereas the Robot Revolution was way more composed, not without its issues. And I was surprised that a lot of my issues with that episode fell with the direction and the set design, with how good the set design has been and how good Peter Hall as a director was in A Good Man Goes to War in Series 6. Like, the reason why I chose the episode 4 of the series to review with you guys before Guy Lambert dropped out of this recording, so I took it up, was because Peter Hall was directing, and he directed A Good Man Goes to War, which is my favorite, or one of my favorite episodes of Series 6, just because I have that affiliation with the director. So for issues with the direction in that episode, to bring the score down was surprising, and I give that episode, I think, a generous 7 out of 10. And then this episode will go into more depth, I'm sure, but so far, since that finale, which was pretty bad and embarrassing to watch in the cinema, even though it was a good experience overall, the show seems to be on the up. It seems to be going in the right direction, I would say.
Connor, your thoughts?
Big time. I pretty much nearly copy and paste Will's sentiment after Empire Death. I feel like I sort of said last week with you, George, whether it was on camera or off camera, I felt like the show's morale a year ago compared to how it is this year is all in two different worlds. I felt like this time last year, Doctor Who 2024 was at an all-time high. I felt like we were all not just excited as fans of the show to go and watch this new Disney Plus era, but going in 12 months later in the calendar, it feels like we are watching two different shows in terms of like the fans' perceptions. But then, like I say, how Empire Death ended the pretty brilliant rise of a series that was series 1, kind of left a sour taste in my mouth. And then fast forwarding to the so-called Joy to the World, it brought me temporary joy. It was kind of like temporary bliss. But as soon as an hour or two had passed, that so-called joy I was supposed to feel, it then kind of just went away. Like Joy to the World happened and then it kind of vanished into nothing. And then whilst not being as like up to depth in like other nerdy fandoms, like because like I said to you as well, George, like Doctor Who is one of the ones that I just like to sort of go in and watch, not read every single leak, article, theory, and whatever. I do just like to sit there, preferably on Saturday night, but it has been fun the last 2 weeks to watch it Saturday morning, midday, before other plans get in my way. Copy Will again. I very much enjoyed last week's episode compared to Space Babies, because it very much could have been Space Babies 2.0, and it really could have left this really awkward, history's going to repeat itself kind of cheeky pun. But then following the momentum of last week into this week, I thoroughly enjoyed this episode quite a bit as well. So despite what the internet and the production side of things is kind of projecting, the show is definitely on and up, but depending on what you read or how bothered you are about the fandom and what people are saying about it, it could make you think one way, but when you actually see the quality of this dusty old relic that's still going over 60 years strong, I don't personally see the doubts or the worry yet. But I know we're only 2 episodes in. But I don't know. I don't get the issue at the minute, aside from the real world things of, is season 3 happening? Which I say we've gone over enough times anyway. But so far, 2 out of 2 for series 2. I'm positive. Morale is a thing. Keep it going, folks.
Yeah, I think that's also down to the fact that it's always just been here now it's like, 20 years in. It's not like we've been a concern of like, it's in danger. Like there's been times where it's felt like it was absolutely a roll of the dice and it could very well have led to it ending, but it always seems to stick around and pull it out at the end. Like I feel like if series 11 wasn't as positively received as it was, I think that could have been it.
Ending point.
Had they not found someone to come in and take over from Chibnall, who was actively looking for a replacement and no one wanted it, that obviously would have ended with Jodie regenerating on a cliff top. I mean, never would have seen the end of it. I think there's been, various times in the Capaldi years. I think Series 10 might have been a bit of we've had a year off. All right, let's try and hit them with what we've got, and we had a nice little sort of refresh. But it's part of like British TV, and like I think the only problem I have with Doctor Who, and it's my favorite show, so I'm allowed to say this, is that TV has changed in 20 years, and Doctor Who has not changed that much really in the last 20 years.
Yeah.
Like similar to what Mike was saying, like you've had different eras, but have they been wholeheartedly different in any way? Like it's always just because Doctor Who is always, it's exactly the same show, but it's also a completely different show. Like you can watch an episode of Hartnell, Troughton, etc., and it feel like what it does now, and vice versa. But it can also be completely different enough because there's more of a focus on history. There's Based Under Siege. There's like different things. Like the RTD era was more like an emotional, like human drama. There was they put the fairy tale thing gets thrown around a lot for the Moffat era, especially for like Amy, Rory, and the Doctor. But like, it's not changed a hell of a lot. Like there's been like there's the odd brand, like the branding changes and stuff like that. Even the new, right, this is Doctor Who from 2005 to 2022, and now we're in the new version. But it also it starts with a version which was another Doctor played by David Tennant, and the callbacks to the show from at least 10-15 years ago. And now we've called out Sutekh from Pyramids of Mars in 1975 and whatever. Like it's not distancing itself in terms of like how was it like 8 years the Doctor Who was off air between the movie and coming back, and so it was a long time for it to kind of leave the public zeitgeist, for it to be missed, and then for it to come back and be like, right, it was different to the classic, because it was like, right, we've stripped back everything we don't really need, and we'll eventually build back up to that kind of thing. And then we've kind of built back up to that and then knocked it down a couple of times, and it kind of doesn't really know where it sits. And it's credit to Piers Wenger for saying that, you know, Doctor Who should have a budget on level with like your Star Wars shows and things like that. Like it should. Like it's one of the biggest and longest running shows on television. It doesn't necessarily need to have money everywhere, but then they've now tied themselves into that of like, you know, you've used the money to build a massive TARDIS set. You've done this, you've done that. You've got big expensive shots. So now you're kind of tied to that money because that's now how you make the show. But I'd
Yeah.
take 10 episodes and, like, you know, there's a couple of cheap, like, you know, the Doctor Light episodes were invented for this very reason, which also then played into the spin-offs because you'd have like a Sarah Jane Light episode, like every series or whatever. And it just all felt like it. I don't want to say that Doctor Who's best days are behind it because I think if that was true, then there would be no point having the show on now.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Like,
big time, big
you've
time.
always got to assume that the best is always yet to come. And I think we had
Yeah.
a golden period. I believe the golden period of Doctor Who was 2005 to about 2011, and then, you know,
Big time.
you completely
Yeah.
dislodged with Series 7 Part 1, putting it on like later in the year, and then that was carried over like 2 years, and then you started to get gaps in series and things like that. But I've enjoyed this. Like, the only problem is like it was written like kind of all in one big block and filmed like there was 4 weeks off. I think we discovered last week between
Yeah.
you know, finishing season 1 and doing season 2. So a lot of the criticisms won't have been heard, if at all, or listened to, because Russell does what Russell wants. So it's probably only would have felt like there would have been some change with that. It like writing a season 3 now. Like, I know there's been ideas and stuff bounded around, and he's talked about season 3, 4, and 5, and story ideas and stuff that could or might not happen, sort of thing.
As good as Shuey is as well, lead on from that, I think the biggest like crime of that is that of like the lack of a gap there is that with A Christmas Carol, that was the first thing they filmed after Series 5 transmitted. And you can kind of sense that in Matt Smith's performance because it is so much, more composed. And while Shuey is fantastic as the Doctor, you don't have like that second series boost in like confidence in terms of acting because you don't have like that knowledge that you're loved and be loved by the audience. And I
Yeah.
think what is exciting about this series in particular, in terms of trying to do something different, is that so far it's like not any returning villains so far. That could change in the next episode based on the leaks. However, what I will say is that I love the approach that they're doing with this series in terms of get Belinda home, get it away from Earth for once, because so many stories are Earthbound. So to have like these stories set on distant planets and spaceships and stuff like that, that's exciting. And especially spaceship episodes, those are generally the best, like based on the siege episodes. So if we get some of that, amazing. I know in episode 4 we have a return to Earth, like that's a Doctor Light episode as well, and allegedly, and it wouldn't surprise me if it is. That also links into the spin-off, similar to the earlier show did, with with the land and the sea, or whatever the fuck it's called. Um, so it links into that episode 4. That's Earthbound. However, every other episode is different from the rest of the show in the regard that it is not on Earth. Like, I was thinking when you said, "Oh, the show's never that different," and I agreed. And I feel like the biggest example I can think of in classic Who, for example, is the stories that are set primarily on Earth with in the John Perry era. So I thought that was a stupendous turn in tone, and like by the end of that era, you were just gagging for the Doctor to get onto a distant world. So when it eventually came, the show felt reinvented. It felt refreshed. It felt like it was about time that it returned. So if we have a series or two of stories that are primarily set off world, in a few years' time, we will be gagging for, the series that we grew up with, set on Earth primarily, with some foes trying to invade Earth. Similarly to how we're like gagging for the Daleks after they're absent for a series and a half. We want them back, even though for like the last 10 years, we've probably been saying, oh, the Daleks are so overused. Why can't we get rid of them? Oh, because they're contractually bonded. I wish that contract never existed because I don't want to see the Daleks. a break does help. So maybe this series is that kind of break that the show needs. But again, like I will mention him, a very controversial figure, Ian Levine. Ian Levine said on Twitter, this is the first time I've like enjoyed the show this much, or I'm paraphrasing here. He didn't say exactly like this. This is the first time that I've seen the show this good since Blink, series 3 episode. However, is this too little, too late to save the show? That's the question. Because if this was a repeat of Space Babies and the Devil's Called, a bad episode and could be better, significantly better episode, if we started this series 2 in the same vein, then I would say like what you said, George. I wouldn't even bother airing the show if what they're gonna churn out is not up to par. But the fact is, series 2 has been up to par so far. But is it too little, too late? That is the question, because it is definitely stronger than series 1, and it is beyond doubt. Even even if season 1 was a bit disappointing with how it started and how it ended, the episodes in between had me feeling excited for each new episode, which was the first time Doctor Who has made me feel like that since about 2015, something like that. Capaldi's second series, I was excited for the new episode the week after, and uh, that was lost with the later Capaldi and definitely with the Jodie episodes with the Chibnall writing them. They were fucking abysmal. So season 1, for all its flaws, at least it was enjoyable and a huge step up from the few years we got between. The point is, the show has not been good, in my opinion, consistently for 10 years, and it does beg the question, is it time for a rest? And that's where it kind of links back to be careful what you wish for. Nothing beats the excitement of a new episode. I don't want the show ending no matter what. Give me more of the 80s quality. 80s Doctor Who was generally quite shit. I was watch seasons of that over the show ending. Like I sat through Once Upon Time, the third episode of series 13 of Flux, I think it was. That episode nearly made me quit on the show. However, no matter how turgid that episode was, I'm such a fan, and you guys are such fans, and there are still millions of fans out there that will still tune in each week because we are loyal to this fucking shit TV show that is largely shit. I'll be honest. I love the show, but I'm not gonna say it's the most consistently good show out there. It's not. It's largely bad. However, I love it. You guys love it. It will prevail. Keep it, even if we get Once Upon Time level shit every week. Rambling end. Sorry.
That's
Very
fine.
I don't know. I don't know, not to break the realism, guys, but Disney Plus did give us a legal requirement to say how much we love the brand. I mean, hashtag not an ad.
Yeah.
No.
Hashtag get my bank account home.
Yeah. Hashtag where's my check, guys?
So,
Nah.
Will, obviously, you like alluded to, the wonderful Guy Lambert was meant to return to the podcast this season and had chosen this episode. But work commitments mean that he can't. Wonder what that means.
The lucky bastard.
But
We'll
so
have to
why
put
did
him in a
you
ring thing.
why did you want to pick this one up as well as your later episode that you're reviewing?
Just because I like talking to you guys, really.
Oh, you
Because like when I chose it, we didn't really know too much about this episode. I'm not even sure we knew like the premise or that Mr. Ring a Ding was in this. Like this, we saw the trailers of the cartoon character. Did we know that this was in episode 2 specifically? I don't think so. So I kind of just took on a whim, like any opportunity to come on, I took, and thankfully it was like a very, very, very good episode that I want to on the rewatch.
So you're Connor, you do the plot?
The plot. Doctor Who goes to the movies. Well, quite literally in 1952's, I want to say Los Angeles. I mean, I've kind of got it on the background, but I'm not really paying too
Miami.
much attention. Miami. Oh, well,
Yeah,
not
Miami.
quite Los Angeles. 1952 Miami. Doctor Who goes to an abandoned cinema. I was expecting like a haunted house cliche, but the haunted house cliche is a haunted cinema where people go in and watch a movie, but then people, like, I think 13 people haven't left. Like 13 people entered and 13 people haven't left the cinema. I mean, that would be a good way for me to go to, like, cheeky pun intended, death by cinema. I mean, that would be the way I think all of us would like to go. Us movie geeks. But yeah, people go into cinema. Oh, these people haven't been seen since. So the Doctor and Shooty Gatwa's fabulous wardrobe go into go into their TARDIS wardrobe, get some 1950s garbs, and take a trip to the movies. And essentially, it's to do with what's on the film reel and let's say the caretaker of the cinema, but the one cinema worker who essentially it's what's on the film is kind of like a love letter to his wife or girlfriend. I want to say wife that then passed, and essentially the film reel that's playing in the cinema is like sort of made in memory of her. And on this film is our lovely icon of Mr. Ring a Ding, who essentially comes to life through the power of moonlight. And I wish, I'm not making this shit up, but essentially it is like light from the moon that then gets projected onto the tape, that then the light from the moon that gets projected onto the tape then gets flung into the big screen. Mr. Ring a Ding is Mr. like really cheesy kids cartoon, but then he suddenly gets all deep and immersive, talks to us, the audience, breaks the fourth wall, and the next thing you know, comes out of the movie and terrorizes 1950s Miami. There you go. That's the quick version of the plot.
You did very well there.
Yeah, thanks. That's the very quick version of the plot.
I mean, yes. Essentially, yes. People are. I know have been drawing comparisons to how similar this is to The Devil's Called in terms of there's another member of the pantheon. It's set in the past.
Yes.
Things like that. Is it sort of the same kind of thing? But I think the animation on Mr. Ring-a-Ding is fabulous. Like the 2D stuff, the CGI, and like how when he's solidifying himself in the real world, using a Time Lord to build me a body. Alan Cumming is amazing. I know there was on Unleashed. Russell talks about how it would have been maybe a bit harder to do if Alan Cumming was on screen, because obviously in recent terms, I know like 7 years ago, but like only a few episodes ago, he was in it as James the First. But I think it's such a different performance, and it's a cartoon character that you can get away with him not being here. But I think he's fabulous. I think once again, Shooty and Veranda are amazing. I'm really liking how it's sort of building them together, and it may be a bit annoying that she's now at the end like, "Oh yes, I trust you completely, Doctor." Man, that
my life for you.
Didn't give a shit about last week, but now I'm like, yeah. Because I loved when she threw back Sasha 55 in his face, like at the end of last week's episode. Because it's a companion that's not taking any shit. Like she doesn't trust him; she just wants to get home. But then it's like, oh, adventure. So we'll see how and when that plays out. I would have liked it to be a bit more fractious, or I think depending on like the fact that next week could be a sequel to Midnight and it's going to be a dangerous, deadly like position to be in, that maybe these 2 episodes should have been flipped round. Like you should have had like her completely at the end of is it The Well next week?
Yeah.
Like her
Yes.
wholeheartedly not trusting him, and then for this episode to bring her back round of because he like takes responsibility for like, oh, I didn't tell you the truth about the Time Lords because so and so. Why like maybe that could have happened, but then it's going to be like, oh, she trusts him, and then she's going to be like, oh no, actually I don't trust you because you nearly got me fucking killed.
Because there was quite a bit of an exposition dump in the sense that this is her second adventure, it's the second week, and she found out that the Doctor's the last of his kind. Oh, poor guy, I guess I got to trust you. I've been a bit harsh on you. Now can we be friends? It's a bit of a pity vote. Whereas, like you just said, if it was rejigged, we could have had another episode where the Doctor's in a bit of a morally grey area. She's a bit in the in the vein of not being sure whether to trust him or not, and then you could have had like this episode to then make her turn her perception of him. I totally agree with that. Yeah, it was a bit exposition heavy and a bit quick for that turnaround to happen. But yeah, very valid point.
I think I'm so invested in the dynamic of the two that I'm kind of just on board. Like, so long as there's like forward momentum and the development continues between the two, I can't really complain. If it kind of stagnates now, then I would say, oh yeah, huge waste of potential. But the two together are so excellent, and in these two episodes, they provide something different. Like there is development going on there. If that continues, I can't really complain. But a lot of people say waste of potential, sure. But like you mentioned, the Last of the Time stuff to add depth to their characters when they were animated and into cartoons. Like, speak about the show being too familiar. That's a plotline from 20 years ago. And I've just got to say, I do honestly hate Trash and Chibnall. However, the work that the Timeless Child has done and making him the last of the Time Lords again through the Gallifrey's destruction because of the Master, he did some untold damage to not just the history of the show, but the show going forward. Because if we keep getting this storyline of the return of the Time Lords, that is so disappointing. Because you had like glimpses of like Russell T Davies writing the character of the Doctor different when it was 14, with David Tennant in the specials, with him breaking down, talking about how his like history has changed and whatever, and having the outburst in what was it, Wild Blue Yonder. You had glimpses of Russell T Davies adapting his writing style because of like events of that era. But now what he's doing is simply writing the same character that he did with Eccleston. And that is so frustrating having that arc be brought back. And I wish there was something different, and I wish he honed in on what he like developed with the 14th Doctor in specials more here, because it's just frustrating, and we take 10 steps back into the show's history to get that same plotline. If you stopped watching Doctor Who with the David Tennant era and came back with Shooty, you must think, wow, they're still doing the thing that I grew up with when I was watching the show. They're still doing the same plotline 20 years on. That's boring.
Oh yeah, I mean there is that argument for it. Yeah, I can completely see where you're coming from.
But yeah, it's like if we keep this going with this for the next few series, then do sack off the show. Like, but I really hope the rumors are true. I'm not going to spoil it just because it is technically a spoiler. But I just hope there is something else out there in terms of Gallifrey. I hope it's somehow brought back, and we can stop this Last of the Time stick, because it should have been done and dusted in Day of the Doctor.
Well, yeah, that was the whole point, and then it was then brought back around because of the Master in the Jodie Whittaker era. So it's kind of again they're recycling like that old adage, and going back and forth. So that is kind of like if we reset the status quo, we can kind of get back to what that was. But you've gone past that can of worms, like you've opened it, like the Doctor got back to Gallifrey, became president, and then he was like, "Oh, I'm just gonna." Like as crappy and campy as like the Five Doctors is, it was like, why not? That's how it all started. And he just fucks off and starts again, and like the Time Lords are there, but he's not really bothered by it, apart from when they interfere with his adventures. Like it
At least
doesn't
that's a
really
decent
need.
story. At least that's a decent story. The Timeless Child doesn't even have like a leg to stand on with it having a good script or good performances or anything good going for it. It's a bad story that wrecked the show backstory, as well as it going forward subsequently. That's not Chibnall's fault. Like going forward, that's on Russell T Davies. But it's Russell T Davies having to adapt to Chibnall storyline that wasn't necessary in the first place, because you had that stuff in series. What series was it? Series 9, wasn't it? No, series 8 was Hellbent. Was it? No, it was series 9.
Series 9 Hellbent, right?
Yeah,
Series 9.
yeah. Series 9 was Hellbent. You had that. Just have Gallifrey be in the pocket universe, not the pocket universe, like at the end of the universe. They're all there. They're all safe, or so we thought. Like, how did the Master even get to? Oh, I don't even care at this point. I don't care about Gallifrey. It's just frustrating when you have this Last of the Time Lord stuff in the same scene where you have like the character moments between the two where their dynamic is being drove forward, whereas we're using things from 20 years ago in the same sequence. So we're on the cusp of greatness with what we're receiving from Russell T Davies writing, but it's just being pulled back by other elements, and that's the biggest frustration I have with this particular episode. I like, yeah, great scene when they were 2D animated, but the last eternal thing, gotta get rid of it again.
And I get there's only so much we can hear about the whole, oh, we did the whole therapy out of order, like as in 15 to 14, and 14 going off and accepting that he was kind of like the end of that. Well, essentially, like I still said way back when, to wrap up the 60th, that essentially Doctor number 14 was kind of like the end of the 1963 run up till then, now slash then at that current point, and then 14 essentially retiring to be with his earthbound family of Donna. I mean, where the fuck is Susan? But that's another question. That Doctor then should have been moved up. 15 came on and had so much energy and was like, the best and worst of everyone, and essentially was ready to move on. And yet, like we just keep saying, there's cusps of greatness in this dynamic between this pairing, and yet in this very same episode, which we want to give fucking 10 out of 10s to, in this very same scene, you get plot points that we keep hearing, whether you're watching it from the RTD era or the Matt Smith era. It's you're taking 2 steps forward, but you're taking a big step back also.
Exactly.
There's no originality to it. It's not, it's irritating. But I noticed it more in this episode than I want to say perhaps than any of Shooty's run thus far.
It just comes out of nowhere, because like in the last episode you have like the Doctor seemingly putting up a guise and being deceptive, and then for like people were praising that on Twitter, especially. They were like, oh my god, the Doctor is going to be deceptive, he's going to be like a Sylvester McCoy type, he's going to be like this for the rest of the series and manipulate Belinda. And in the very next episode, out of bloody nowhere, just to get out of a tight spot, he says like his deepest, darkest secrets to Belinda, and all of a sudden the development is like stunted potentially, because now she trusts him completely. But just for a praise of the first episode of the series to be completely, brushed aside by this moment in the second episode does kind of jar, and I think that's where that kind of feeling comes from.
Yeah,
it's the context.
Yeah, all fair points, really. What did we make of like Lux Imperator and that whole, linking it back to the Pantheon? Are we done with this kind of group of gods thing, or are we like here for it? Is it obviously some kind of big bad thing we're building towards?
I'm not done until we get Omega. No, I'll die on that hill alone. No, I mean, if this season's big bad isn't Omega, then I'll be fuming. If it isn't Omega or the Rani, then I'll be fuming. No, I don't know. I don't know what else it really could be realistically. If it isn't going to be another classic villain that we haven't seen for 40 odd years, but then done hopefully not as shy as Suit Tech. No, I don't know. No, I'm not done with the Pantheon. I don't want the Pantheon to be the thing to get brought up early in ideally season 3, like this time in a couple years' time as well. But I do like the fact that Suit Tech at least wasn't the end of that whole arc. Thank goodness. So I feel more positive about it than perhaps most. But as soon as he mentioned like Pantheon, Toymaker, Maestro, my eyes then kind of, my ears popped and my eyes were glued to the screen even more, because I thought, oh, because he's actually part of something bigger than just being a 2D cartoon. I personally was excited by it because I just want something other than Suit Tech to be the end of that arc. But yeah, we'll see where all that goes.
I mean, that's if they're able to be brought back now that they've supposedly been defeated. But like, I think they will, and they must be leading to something, because at the end of the giggle, when the first of the Pantheon with the Toymaker was like reintroduced, you had like the allusions to the boss. Like, we have no idea who the boss is yet. Well, actually, no, I think that's in the Star Beast when Meep says, "Oh, and the boss," and then you've got the scene at the end of after they defeat the Toymaker of somebody elusive picking up the ring, which supposedly contains the master, I think it was said to be. So you've still got like these kind of threads that still going on from the 60th, and the 60th was the one to start the Pantheon. So there must be something to build to, and I would like to think that Russell had like a bit of 2020 vision and was able to kind of foresee that only 2 series were commissioned, so he had to deal with all and wrap all of these things up in season 2. Because imagine if like they do like a Stephen Moffat type beat where they kind of do what he did in Matt Smith run, where he did the arcs across all 3 series. Russell doesn't have the leverage to do a 3 series arc because he only had series 2 and series 1 confirmed to him. So if he extends this, that would have been a huge, huge mistake. So it must build something to something in the reality war, which is the name of the final episode, because that alone kind of suggests that gods should be involved there. If it's a reality war, that's a perfect opportunity from name alone to have godlike creatures there.
I mean, I just don't want it to be copy of a classic villain that we will get absolutely excited about seeing, but then I don't want it to be a less received portrayal like we got this time last year. In fairness, it could be anything. It could be the most like one-off 70s villain, and I'd still be excited for it personally. I can't think of any name off the top of my head, but like I don't want it to be a rinse and repeat formula of what we got this time last year. But absolutely, it does need to lead to something, and again, something other than suit tech. But then if Russell was ballsy enough to end it on a cliffhanger to make that the hook for a potential 3rd season, then I wouldn't hate it. But then again, if it's just the same, then I will. If it's different enough, then fair play. But again, we'll know in like 5 weeks' time where all this is going to go anyway.
What did you two think of like the unexpected trio of the Pantheon like villains? So you've got the Giggle, you've got the Devil's Cord, and you've got Lux. Like as a trio, does that hold up to you? Because I think as a trio, that's a very strong like thing, and I think the Devil's Cord is like the only potential miss on like a hit or miss scale. I would say like the Giggle's like a 7 or an 8 out of 10. Lux, I'll get to my score later, and I feel like the Devil's Cord at worst is probably like a 4 or 5 out of 10. Like I think it's a very good trio. What do you
Why
think?
Why would you put Devil's Cord at the bottom? I'm interested. Why is it not part of your trilogy?
No. So I think I think overall it's a very good trilogy of episodes. It's certainly better than like the likes of We Lost George. It's certainly better than the likes of the Monk trilogy in series 10, something like that, which was like consecutive as a trio. Whereas this one, I would say, I loved the Giggle when it first transmitted. I thought that was a 10 out of 10 the first time I watched it. I was like, that's fucking incredible. But then as the days went on, after about 2 days, I thought about it and I was like, it was just the hype, I think, of the Bio Generation, an excellent performance from Neil Patrick Harris as the toy maker. That made me drop it down to a 7 out of 10 because I had overhyped it because of some elements of that story when it was not as strong as it could be. Whereas Devil's Cord, I feel like it may have just been like the battle scars of Space Baby still rubbing off on me, but the fact that we had such a dismal episode beforehand made me not appreciate that following episode as much as I could have done if I just watched it standalone. Like I don't think I've rewatched that episode since like the week it transmitted, and maybe I owe it a rewatch. But I just remember it being quite cringe. I thought like the Beatles stuff was awful. I thought the dance sequence didn't make any sense contextually to the narrative because they cut out a line, and that line of dialogue that was cut out that like explains why they were all dancing and broke into song at the end. That being cut cost like the episode at least a point of a score, in my opinion. So that dropped it down, and I just thought it was a bit of a mess. And Lux, as much as I've kind of been mixed on it so far, I really loved it, especially the second time around. So as a trilogy, I think the other two bring up the Devil's Cord to make it at least good.
Oh yeah, I like what you said. I mean, I disconnected through that, so what I heard, I liked.
I mean, the question was, George, what did you think of like the Pantheon trilogy that we've kind of got with the Giggle, the Devil's Called, and now Lux. What do you think of the trilogy?
Yeah, from what I heard of your bit, yeah, I agree with what you're saying about it. Like I do think maybe we didn't think the toy maker would lead to there's more out there and we're gonna really play with like some kind of gods and myths, but in sci-fi kind of thing. I've enjoyed all 3 episodes. Well, if you're gonna count the finale, which I tend to try and forget, but
Tell me all.
I liked bringing back the toy maker. I liked Maestro. I thought that was a really nice new big bad sort of character to introduce. Lux and all that seem, there can be ones that are one-time villains, and there could be other pantheons that are pantheon members that are like multiple times. Like I like that there's all kind of, there's still something to build towards, whether that be that Mrs. Flood is, the Rani or the boss or whoever she is, or Susan or Susan's fucking uncle's brother's cousin's dog. Like
Wow. Yeah.
I didn't think it would lead to sort of semi-thread thing. I'm here for it as long as like we always have anything that the payoff is like good. But that all does depend on where it goes, if it's going to be wrapped up for this or it's going to be left as a thread for a potential 3rd season. But I think Lux as a one-off member really does work. Like I'd like it, it might seem a bit like as the Doctor Who fans in the episode said, it's a bit obvious, it's a bit boring. It might be sort of like that, and Russell T Davies poking fun at himself and fans of the show, but it's like sometimes simple is better. Like it doesn't have to be a big sort of end of the universe kind of thing. It's just some guy that wants to go outside, and then you give him all of light, and he's just gonna become everything and nothing, and he carries on growing forever and essentially becomes a god. Like he is everywhere and everything and omnipotent and whatever. But he also
he is the definition of A24. He is everything everywhere all at once.
Ah, very good. Did we like the Doctor Who fan thing? Like I like the animation section, and then the whole like the break through the telly, and then the Doctor Who fans are there, as well as some very cleverly placed but slightly blurred out, but you still know what it is merchandise, like collection box sets, Big Finish stuff.
Yeah. Yes.
All cleverly going, hey, look, there's merch.
Oh, no, I just like to Telos. I like the old classic Sideman logo. I was like, oh, is that a hint? No, I don't know. Telos Sideman shirt was cool. You can't diss him. Tom Baker scarf is a bit obvious, like Fourth Doctor character. I was like, okay, but I liked the Telos Sideman shirt. You can't diss him. The Sidemen are my personal fave, so
it's great product placement as well.
Yeah.
Mate, I thought the scene was brilliant. I mean, I think this leaked. It definitely leaked, and that makes the line about the leak even more funny. And I do fear that Russell T Davies is purposely putting out these leaks to kind of drum out interest and, as he put it, create content, because we all knew that was going to happen. Like the Doctor Who was going to go meta, but I think it was like absolutely great as a scene because I was actually incorporated into the plot. Like Lux's plan to trap them in a scenario where they're characters and they have a bit of like a questioning. They question themselves to buy Lux time. I thought that was brilliant. And I thought whilst a few lines were clunky and the incredibly dramatic music is brought back from when the Doctor flies the Pandora into the exploding TARDIS, those two scenes don't match at all, and the scene's not nearly as dramatic, is otherwise, because of the context and the narrative and Lux's plan, is a worthy scene. And it was funny, it was somewhat tear jerking, and yeah, I mean, is as handled as well as it could have been, considering how much like the fandom was in complete disarray at the idea before saying, "Oh, it's going to be awful," but now everyone seems to love it. Like that scene earlier in the episode where it's like that visual callback to The Devil's Called, where the Doctor and Belinda go and change their clothes, which is like tracking the shot is exactly identical to the shot that is in The Devil's Called. that was discourse for like a week on Twitter. Like absolutely everyone was mad at that, saying, "Oh, Doctor Who's lacking originality. Just sack off the show if they're just gonna be lazy like this." When in reality, if you're proud of a 15-second shot from the previous series, why not have this cool visual gag? And I think that is like the epitome of Doctor Who fans not appreciating nice little things and going berserk about it over on Twitter, as opposed to just giving it a chance. Because as it turns out, nobody gives a flying fuck about the visual callback anymore because they're just praising the episode, and no one's saying the Doctor Who goes meta scene is bad anymore or lazy or unoriginal because it was a great scene despite the clunky dialogue. So I just think Doctor Who fans, especially, have to take a chill pill, especially on Twitter, because these moments aren't great. You know.
Yeah.
Yeah, Connor, you got anything to add on top of that?
Um, yeah, just like even as I'm basically getting into the third act of the episode now, which again, because sorry, due to the YouTube laws, you can't hear me. Unfortunately, watch it. It's yeah. Ring a Ding was great. Lux was great. Lux Eternia. If it was a one-off villain, it'd be a shame, but at the same time, it goes down as one of my favorite one-off roles. Yeah, I'm trying to go back to subject of relevancy. I'm trying to think of points to make, but I agree with everything that everyone's saying. there's no yeah, this is a very civil discussion. There's no controversial you know I like this, you like that, why debate in this episode, unfortunately.
I mean, I was speaking to Michael the other day, Michael Wilson, Silver Screen, Hit or Miss, whatever. And I said to him, mate, I feel so bad because whenever I go on to the Nerd Bible podcast, like this podcast, or the Silver Screen, or the Hit or Miss Who Trek channel, which Michael does, I always seem to be like the more negative one in recent years. Like, and I feel like I still love the show, but I always seem to be put onto episodes that I just don't particularly enjoy. Like, for example, I thought about the Jodie Whittaker retrospective that almost ended with me and Andy fucking launching ourselves at each other because we disagreed so much in our final part. And I was just like, bro, I don't want to hate this era, but I just do. And to actually
No,
come onto something like in this episode and just enjoy it mercifully, because I was more mixed. The first time I watched it, I was like, I'm really not sure what to give it. Even the second time, I wasn't sure what to give it. I gave it like a 6 out of 10 the first time. So the second time I watched it, I was like, okay, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna make my notes, which I have in front of me on my laptop. I'm gonna make my notes, and then besides each one, I'm gonna, add a weighting to them. I'm gonna give it like a one, a zero, no, a one, 0.5, 0, minus zero point 0.5, or a -1 in terms of like how much it drags the score, and then kind of work out the average based on that. So I eventually landed on a score, but it's just such a weird episode to rate because it's largely good, but there are just like these little annoying things. But largely, I loved it. And George, what about you? I feel like me and Connor have kind of taken this since you disconnected as well. What do you think of Lux?
It's cool because the internet took me away, but it's nice to sit back and actually, because I feel like sometimes I get a bit too like I don't let Connor speak at all, and I beat him down like verbally. Which I'm sorry, Connor.
whoa.
I am the Lux Imperator of this podcast. Now hear me roar. I like this one. Like this is one of the early ones we had like set photos of. So like we was like, oh, it's a period piece. It's in America. There's going to be some animation segments, which I think were all done beautifully well, especially when like the Doctor and Belinda are then animated. Like, oh, I can't think. I've got a 2D brain, and like just like fun little things like that. That Russell's like very good at sort of like poking the audience with, whether or not he can sort of, like we've said before, like whether he can live up to this like the same sort of stuff that Moffat has done. But I think that sort of whole thing with like I'm Lux Imperator, I'm the god of light and so on is like, and I'm the last thing you see before you fall into the abyss. It's like that's such a Russell thing. Like that was such a Russell piece of writing. It was good. It's like you said, Will. It does prove that there is still life in the old girl yet. Like not every episode can be like this and be this fun and be this sort of
No.
out there. And like I've known people that have watched this and gone like, "What the fuck was that?" But also like for me, it was like it was good and it was better than last week, and it feels like we're heading towards like the right direction with everything that's like left coming up. You're like, this could kind of if they stick the landing at least on what they're trying or what we think they're trying to achieve in these episodes, it could be one of the best or better series of the 2005 to present run. It can definitely be, I think, better than last season. I liked last season. I just wish there was more of it. I wish that Shooty wasn't filming Sex Education the same time as this, because as much as I liked like sort of his conflict in Dot and Bubble, where he's like, this bitch is a racist, but I still want to save her. Like, because we've not really sort of dealt with a lot of that yet, have we? Like the racial implications of the Doctor being a person of color and the companion as well, because automatically whatever room they go into in whatever point in time, they could, their opinion isn't mattered and they won't be listened to. Their voice won't count. And yet they are the wisest and most obvious choices in the room to get them out of a predicament, but certain people won't listen to it. So we've not played on that a lot. Dot and Bubble, obviously, but played up to be less obvious until the end. But like the signs, like as you're seeing it, and the fact that they're only speaking to Ruby and not the Doctor. Whereas this, there was a bit more of like playing into that because of the time period, and like you think that like this kind of racism was like years and years ago, but even like in the 50s, it's like no, it's still there, and it's in a lot of places around the world still fucking prevalent today, which is fucking depressing to think.
I mean, this is like
I
the
just
first kind
wish.
of episode that. Sorry, you carry on.
No, I was just gonna say, like, I just wish that there was more of Shooty to have. Like, we could possibly end his run and only have what 18 episodes, which is just an absolute travesty for a doctor like him. I think he's up to standard. He's proved that he can be a fabulous doctor. He's got outfits for days, which the cosplayers probably both love and hate. But
yeah, and their bank accounts.
yeah, it's going to be nice to have a run of 8 episodes. Hopefully that he's in all of them. So we'll see how that goes. But I think the podcast one with Ruby and Unit will be more of a Doctor Lightish episode that may set up the war between land and the sea. Sorry, Will, what was you saying?
No, I was just gonna add on to like the racism commentary. I thought, it's excellently subtle. Like it's not as overt as it could have been. It's just enough, yet it's very, very powerful. With like the Doctor looking at his skin tone, and then like thinking about the context, and then also the bit in the parlor where it's like bending the rules, and then later in the episode when in the false reality that Lux imposes, you have the mother of Tommy Lee be what can obviously be seen as like racist because she's suspecting of him that he's up to no good. Like that's also an excellent like kind of commentary into that like racism aspect. But then you've also got like the amazing line where in the parlor later with the actual mother of Tommy Lee, like the real version, where he says just before that he goes to her, he says to Belinda, I will let people topple their awards first, and I'll just shine in mine, and I'll shine, whatever the phrase was. I thought that was a fucking powerful line. I loved it. So I feel like this is like I feel like a lot of the people that say, "Oh, the show's too woke now," just think it's kind of crammed down their throats. When in reality, it is woven into the storylines like it is here. And I feel like Russell, especially, might not get enough praise for his work with racism, how he tackled it in this episode. I thought it was superb. So I had to add that.
Sorry, I was still.
Yeah, so I thought
still
Connor was
here.
going to say something, so I was like sitting back.
Yeah, I was waiting for you.
I was waiting for
you hang
you.
on first.
We should end our sentences with prompts like George, Connor, Will.
What do you think?
Yeah.
Do you think this will go down as one of the favorites of Shooty's era, RTD2 in general? Is it
For
sort
me,
of
yes.
on par for like a top end episode of like New Who or Who in general?
For me, like just short answer, yes. Although I think the reason why I think, and as I've gotten older and as a Doctor Who's merchandise has grown in the form of buying the old classic animations from the to entertain the BBC studios over the last handful of years, 3 or 4, 5 years, I think it's played a big part of that. I feel like for me, I couldn't help but feel like this was a weird meta take on animation versus real life and how you know, Mr. Ringadin, although he wanted to become like real and basically get out of the animation, in the end, it didn't matter because animation in of itself is an art form, and unfortunately, we wouldn't necessarily have this lens if none of the episodes from the 60s were missing, mind you. But then it just even in other animations things like the Spider-Verse movies or I liked the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. This episode for me was about the animation as well as the plot and Ring a Ding and everything else. But it was just a weird meta animation take that I've only gone to appreciate because again, how much of a fan we are of not just this show, but how much of a fan of the animations that I am anyway. Yeah, just that was just a bit of a loose tangent, but it was just a weird. It was like animation versus reality was a back thread going on in my mind when I'm watching it. But I think I'm probably the person that can only relate to that. Maybe I don't know. Niche fault.
In terms of the resolution of the episode, are we happy with that? Are we sort of like 2 episodes in, we're happy to carry on this journey and where it's going?
Oh, big time, big time. Yes, I'm still invested, like I was this time last year. But in theory, the well is this next episode. The well, this should be the next sleeper hit. This should be the boom of the season. If the formula is going to be this, formulaic, so to speak, this should be the next review should be the best one.
Exactly. I mean, the next episode is a sequel of like a much loved Russell T Davies story. I think the audience probably know this by now. It is the sequel of Midnight, supposedly. So if it lives up to that billing, if it lives up to like that 10 out of 10 amazing Russell T Davies one era episode, then I feel like to answer your question, George, originally, is this a new classic? Is this a modern classic? I think if the next episode is a straight 10 out of 10, I feel like this episode might be slightly pushed to the wayside, similarly to how the dynamic of 73 yards and Boom have. Some people say Boom is fantastic, 73 yard pales in comparison, and vice versa to other people. And I feel that might be a situation similar to this, where if the well is fantastic, will Lux be remembered as the best of the series? Maybe, maybe not. You might have people like Michael. Michael, I can't recall what he thought of this episode, but if he hates Midnight, for example, so if he hates the next episode but loves this one, he might say, "Oh, this is the classic. The next episode is shit," and to other people, it might be vice versa. So, if to answer your question simply, I think this has got potential to be a modern classic. I feel like a few things need to be tightened up. For example, I've got in my notes here, there is a slight audio mix issue, and I got the exact timestamp of it at 38 minutes 56 during the climax, where the music dips too much to allow the dialogue to prevail. And I noticed it on both watches, and it's very frustrating to notice something like that because it pulled me out what should have been at least visually, at least, the build up to the climax, and it was the most exciting part of the episode. Yet the music, which helped build that excitement, dipped too much, and that was inexcusable. And I think, from an editing kind of perspective, I'm an editor. I went to a filmmaking course as an editor. Something like that pulls you out, and something like that, as a whole of an episode, you need the audio mix to be consistent and good because in my opinion the audio in general of anything is the most important thing. Something could be so visually shit, but as long as the audio is good, it's bearable. Whereas if the audio is unbearable, but the visuals are great, that is unwatchable in my opinion, just because you're listening to some shit. So if that thing is tweaked for like iPlayer going forward, I'm happy to say this is a classic. This is a modern classic because in 20 years' time, at least they fixed the audio issue so I can actually enjoy it front to back and not be sucked out of it at the climax during the most integral bit to be invested in it. And I don't know if either of you noticed that, like slight audio mix, or like frantically going to see if you can notice it on iPlayer. But yeah, that was a slight nitpick that probably means more to me as an editor than the casual viewer would, but it was very noticeable for me. Did you guys notice?
I mean, I can't say I did personally, but next time, I mean, again, not that I was watching it just now with no audio, but I'm literally going to turn my TV up to 100. And I promise I'm not taking the mic when I say it. I'm going to get my earbuds cleaned. I'm going to do this myself and analyze every. No, I will. No, I'll make more of a point of it going forward. But no, I mean, yeah, it would bug me if I was in your shoes as well. I'm like, as not just to plug shameless plug 4Ks. I'm a visual guy. I mean, I'm not saying I listen to my movies in complete silence, because I very much believe sound and images are just as equally as important. However, for me personally, not being an editor, sound is to me secondary, but I'm not deflating saying quality over quantity at all, or any, like, I'm not basically dissing audio is just as important, whether it's mono, stereo, or a mixture of both, and everything else that's advanced. But yeah, I get how things like that from your perspective would bug you, considering it was your thing, or it is your thing rather.
It's the way I've kind of been brought up because, okay, I'm going to mention a guy, Michael Jackson. Whatever you think of the man, I feel like his philosophy with sound, he said to like his nephews, he would put on a horror film and he would watch it, he would play it through once with his nephews and he would say, just watch it. And they would generally be terrified. Then they would rewatch it without the sound to kind of hit home how important audio is. And then ever since I heard that story from Michael Jackson's nephew, Taj, it kind of made me appreciate how important audio is. And like on my film course, there were so many productions where, yeah, great, you shot on a Sony camera. It's gorgeous, but I can't hear the dialogue. I can't hear stuff. The
Yeah,
audio's slipping because
yeah.
it's not smooth transitions. That Michael Jackson thing has made me appreciate sound way more growing up.
Oh, no,
Yeah.
That's fair enough.
No, I can't diss it. I feel bad. This is the peaceful podcast. Sorry, Mike. This is the peaceful
Why are we
podcast. We
calling
agree
Mike
with
out like we're going to war with him?
No, because I thought that was going to be your thing earlier. Like, Will, when you mentioned about where every time you're on our podcast, I want you going to say we're all like peaceful,
We're all
peaceful collaborators. Whereas on everyone else's podcast is when you get into the debates. But this is my debate: audio versus visuals. Guys, leave your below.
I watched the telly off. I literally just imagine the script in my head.
I hear voices in my head. Yeah, like Randy
I hear
Orton.
all the time, but it's mainly yours going, please can we just stop recording this piece of shit? And I'm like, okay, let's go home. What would we give our
Jesus.
rankings, or like what would we rate this episode out of 10?
I've got a little conclusion, so do you want to go first?
Okay, I'd say for me this is a solid 8, I think. Because last week would have probably been about 6.5, maybe just underneath a 7. And I really enjoyed everything this was going for. It might grow on me in years to come. I think it's of the higher echelon, at least of the Shooty Gatwa episodes. I like the production design. I liked our two leads. I like the chemistry together. I think at points the writing was slick. I think at other points it was maybe, like you said, a bit clunky. I like that, either way, Russell's just making whatever version of Doctor Who he wants, and we're all going to watch it because we don't want to not watch Doctor Who. But yeah, I like the way this plays into the thread of the pantheon of gods. Is this going to get a decent resolution at the end of the season. Is it ever going to be picked up again? Who knows? But yeah, I liked the animation work, Alan Cumming. All in all, it was just it was nice to watch this because I watched it on broadcast on Saturday night, and it was like, oh, this is Doctor Who's back on again, and I enjoyed it, and there was no negatives really for me to outright say this was terrible because I had a good time with it.
That's the main thing, isn't it? That you enjoy it.
Connor, this is where you say your one, and then Will can conclude.
George, you said it for me. That's it. I'm going to give this episode a 1. Unpopular opinion. No, I'm like George because we're going to keep the theme of peace. I'm going to get. No, I was generally going to say an 8 out of 10 as well. Not that I remember scoring last week's episode. In all honesty, I mean, did we even score last week's episode? I know we obviously did our job about it, but did we give it a number? I don't remember a number for last week's episode.
To be fair, what happened was because we recorded them out of sync. I mean, I definitely remember rating it with Mike and DK, and I probably forgot to ask you purely because then we cut to their bit and then cut back out of it. So that might be my fault. So go on, give us your Robot Revolution number then.
So my faults from many weeks ago in the ether, in the vortex. I'm going to say last week's episode is maybe a 7 going to 7.5. And I think bottom line is I think episode 2 was better than last week's episode, even though I do praise both episodes of season 2 thus far. Despite what we've pointed out was more of an issue with rehashed ideas from the golden days of RTD before, I don't think stuff like that is going to personally get me to lower the score in this occasion. If it becomes a thread like this time next week and then in episode 4 and 5, etc., then maybe I will need to reevaluate what we've said thus far into the cosmos. But at the same time, like, both these episodes have been like really good thus far. Again, projection of the fandom aside and the state of the show, Doctor in Distress and all that garbage. Like, I feel like that's just hot garbage. But then, as someone that isn't actively trying to read and go into that thread, I'm just being as casual about it as possible until we get told otherwise. But for me, yeah, I'd give this a solid 8, whether or not there's a biasy in terms of my animation faults. And again, Alan Nightcrawler being in Doctor Who is just a really random sentence that you wouldn't necessarily have put together if this was announced a year ago, as well as him being back in Avengers. Whatever, that's a separate tangent. Yeah, just really solid episode, decent idea. I just, Doctor Who at the movies. I mean, Doctor Who at the movies? I mean, that's pretty meta in of itself. I mean, that's what happened this time last year. Yeah, no, cool episode. 8 out of 10. Moving on. Will, your turn to speak.
I'm shocked and bamboozled that we've all given it the same score. I can't lie. I also gave it an 8 out of 10. I do have like a little handful of notes that I just whiz through. I thought that the mystery introducing the theater being locked up with the the metal, what is it, the chains. I thought that was silly. Also, Tommy Lee's mother said they turned the entire cinema upside down and searched it again and again and again, but not once did they notice and go into the projector room and see the film reel with the victims on. I thought that was a bit bizarre. And I said the projectionist reminiscing about his late wife, starting with a wonderful transition into a flashback and ending with the powerfully poignant line, "If that thing is real, then so is she," encapsulates a fantastic exchange. And finally, in terms of my notes before the conclusion, I said, I saw someone on Twitter mention it, and forgive me, but I can't remember who it was. But how cool would it have been if the black bars of death, aka the letterbox effect, the aspect ratio, were to be removed when the Doctor and Belinda escape the film and enter the real world? Like when they push the glass forward, half the black bars leave consistently with how the glass falls down. I thought that was like not a criticism, just a missed opportunity. I thought that would have been cool to break the immersion of it being a TV show even more. But to the conclusion now, I said, just to repeat myself, it took a rewatch to fully appreciate, but Lux is proof that beyond some of the dismal episodes from the previous series, there is still light at the end of the tunnel. It isn't perfect, with a handful of script-induced annoying moments, a brief dip in audio mix, and some misfitting music. However, Lux is another step in the right direction towards where the show could be once again great. With memorable moments of terrific direction, touching, exciting character development, striking sequences that are again memorable, and incredibly convincing work done to produce Mr. Ring-a-Ding, I must say Will Templar, notoriously difficult to please when it comes to Who in the last 8 years, have somewhat joined the hype train to say this is definitely in contention to be considered a modern classic. Just fix that audio dip near the 39-minute mark on iPlayer going forward, and I'll be on board with that notion. And I'll give, again, Lux an 8 out of 10, similar to you guys. Thank you for letting me ramble. Again.
Always a pleasure, Will. Thank you for being here and doing what you do best. And the best thing is, you get to do it all again in a couple of weeks.
I do, and hopefully that lives up to the bidding. That is the episode I wanted to join you with. So if it's a damn squib, if it's a bit shit, mate, I am so glad I've done this one retrospectively, because that would be disappointing.
Thank you
Watch
to
out, episode
the ghost of Guy Lambert for
gonna
doing
be
it for us.
Yeah. Thanks, Guy, for sacrificing this episode to give it to me.
What a guy.
Well
What a
done.
guy.
Is there anything, Will, that you would like to plug on your way out?
If you're a fan of Doctor Who in the audience, subscribe to the Who Adventures channel. Connor and George are on it very prominently. George as a chaser in the chase episodes that we do. God knows how he made it on as a chaser, but he is. So that's fun. And there's my personal YouTube channel, which is just my name, Will Templar, as well, for more general entertaining videos as opposed to any sort of niche. And that's about it for me. And Instagram, Will Templar 03, if you want to follow me there. Thank you. Yeah.
Connor, you know what to do from here?
Nerdbiblecontact at gmail.com. Twitch, TikTok, Blue Sky. Every time I want to say Blue Sky, I want to say Blue Sky Studios. I don't know why. Insert future gaming links below. Xbox Live, PSN, Switch ID. If we had a TARDIS key, I'd lend you one, but unfortunately, that's not an option. You guys, social media better than me, that's for sure. Hit us up, share us, like us, comment below, share the love, and let us go down in your time vortex and travel together as one big peaceful universe. Whoa, hey, don't make me laugh.
I was about to track that one as well.
We will be joined next week for the by the wonderful Andy Kemp, and then Will will be back, so you will see more of him before the end of the series. And if Doctor Who does end, or is at least on a break, we will have to get everyone that's guested and talked about it to talk about it on a big discussion thing.
It's really retrospective.
Yes,
it'll be the moment that we'll be prepared for.
We'll have to get Will, Mike, Andy, Dom, Guy, DK, and the rest of the universe. Maybe we will reassemble soon. But until then, see you guys next week for more Doctor Who.
Bye.
Who?